Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Welcome to High Strangeness, the podcast where we step into the unusual, the mysterious, and the hidden corners of our reality. I'm Tony, and today we're opening the door into a world many of us know only through television or whispered stories. The strange psychology of hoarding. Why do some people hold on to objects, sometimes mountains of things, that seem worthless to everyone else? As we'll see, hoarding isn't about laziness or mess. It's about memory, identity, and emotional survival. So let's dig into the piles and uncover what they really mean. When people think of hoarding, they imagine homes overflowing with newspapers, clothes, and broken appliances. But clinically, the hoarding disorder is defined as a persistent difficulty in discarding possessions regardless of value, strong urges to save or distress when discarding items, and clutter that interferes with living spaces. Now that's from the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Illness, and estimates suggest about 2 to 2.5% of the population meet criteria for the hoarding disorder. That's millions of people, more than you or I might think. Now it's important to distinguish hoarding from collecting. Collectors are selective, organized, and proud to share. Hoarders often feel ashamed, disorganized, and overwhelmed.
Hoarding starts in childhood and especially in the teenage years. So there are cases reported of hoarding in children, and certainly treatments reported for children with hoarding disorder. But for the most part, most people who come in seeking help are probably age 40 and older, often in their middle 50s, so in midlife, and often older adults. But that's not because the problem doesn't start earlier. So one of the important issues for us is figuring out how to catch it early, especially in young adulthood, in order to prevent it from getting much, much worse in older adulthood. In children and adolescents, we would often see very strong emotional attachments to objects, and sometimes an idea called anthropomorphizing, in which the individual imbues the object with human-like traits. So that could happen, for example, to a book, and a child might think of the book as having feelings. That's less common in adults, although we do see it from time to time. One of the characteristics that we're fairly commonly seeing in people who have hoarding disorder is an early childhood experience of a somewhat more chaotic upbringing where they may have moved a lot, or they may have had early losses of caretakers, people who died or people who left or moved in or moved out. So that's not an uncommon pattern. We do sometimes see traumatic events that occur early in life. That's not uncommon, but it's not true for everybody.
So why does someone hold on to the stacks of old flyers or dozens of broken mugs? Psychologists point to several overlapping factors. Number 1, cognitive distortions. Beliefs like, I might need this someday, or if I throw this away, I'll regret it. Many hoarders struggle with decision-making and categorization. Number 2, emotional attachment. Items may seem sentimental or have a sentimental value and stand in even for loved ones, or feel like extensions of yourself. Number 3, trauma and loss. Hoarding often worsens after bereavement, divorce, or even financial instability. Number 4, comorbidity. Hoarding frequently co-occurs with OCD, ADHD, anxiety, and even depression. And neurobiology. Brain imaging shows differences in decision-making circuits and emotional regulation. In short, the piles of stuff are not random. They're a coping strategy, a shield against loss, chaos, or fear. So, to understand this better, let's hear from an expert right now.
I think it's interesting that, as we said in the introduction, a lot of people who have this hoarding disorder don't think it's a problem. So if there's, something else like anxiety or depression where you can't see it, with hoarding, you can see it. The evidence is right there. You can't move around your home like you used to be able. Why is it that people who are hoarders can't see that it's a problem?
Yeah, there's really three big things that go on into the types of symptoms that we see in compulsive hoarding. So one is difficulties with information processing. So they have difficulties with attention, concentration, organization, and decision making. So sometimes that leads to not necessarily being aware of a problem. I'm just messy. I'm just a little disorganized. Secondly is problems with their beliefs. So they have what's called a double-barreled reinforcement, that they like doing what they're doing. They're interested in like acquiring things as the thrill of the hunt, or I could really use this for some reason in some way, or boy, this person will really like this and it feels good. And sometimes they do the behaviors too to make themselves feel less bad if they're really stressed. Mourning the loss of something, this may be a thing that they do to feel less bad. So there's a double-barreled level of reinforcement where they don't notice it, and they see things differently than we do. So this could be used in some way someday, or this is so unique and different. And then there's problems in behavior, and that's where the avoidance, comes into play, where they realize that they've got clutter and it can cause them problems in life, but they feel too overwhelmed to deal with it, or I'll just deal with it later, kind of idea, putting things off. But then the thrill of the hunt and the acquiring, so doing too much of some kind of behavior, again, it serves a purpose, and it tends to elevate the mood and at the same time kind of put aside some difficult emotions.
That was interesting. There is seeing the symptoms of this condition externally, meaning us and the world seeing this. And then there is what's going on internally by the person with the condition. Now, do you know someone like this? Is there someone in your neighborhood who shows evidence of this? I do, and it's sad to drive down that street and being able to see the stacks of papers, books, and junk stacked up the front or the windows of that house of the person who lives there.
It is normal for children to collect things or to have a messy room, but most kids don't get upset if someone cleans up their stuff or makes them throw away things like old pizza boxes. If your child is extremely attached to objects that seem worthless and is very upset by even the idea of throwing them away, it may be a sign of hoarding. Kids who hoard develop extreme anxiety about losing their possessions. They may even throw tantrums or become violent if their parent try to clean up or get rid of things. One common reason that kids hoard is that they believe objects have feelings and will become lonely or sad if they get cleaned up or thrown away. Kids might also get attached to things that are connected to good memories, like a candy wrapper from a sleepover with friends. They feel that throwing away the object would mean throwing away the memory too. Children who hoard often don't understand why they're doing it.
The consequences can be devastating. Hoarding leads to fire hazards and blocked exits, the inability to use your kitchen, bathrooms, and bedrooms, and health risks like pest, mold, and unsanitary conditions, and emotional toll like shame and isolation and depression. One large study found hoarding symptoms cause more daily impairment than chronic conditions like diabetes or even back pain. The clutter becomes a prison, and the stigma only makes it worse. Media portrayals often sensationalize, which can prevent people from even seeking help.
A person who has hoarding disorder would have a hard time getting rid of their possessions. They would have intense attachments to those possessions. They would experience a lot of distress if they were to part from their items. They have a tendency to also accumulate items. So they might be bringing things home that are free from, an event. They could be buying a lot of things when it's on sale just so that they can have it. And the accumulation gets to a point where places in the home is no longer used for what they're intended for. So this coffee table wouldn't be used for things such as these cups. Tubs aren't used for bathing. The stove isn't used for cooking because it is filled with stuff.
So is there hope? Yes, treatments exist, though progress can be slow. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, tailored for hoarding, teaches decision-making, organization, and discarding skills. Harm reduction approaches focus first on safety, like clearing fire exits and reducing risks rather than instant transformation. Support groups help reduce for isolation. And medication may address co-occurring conditions like depression or anxiety. But the key really is patience. Forcing someone to just clean up rarely works, and it can even worsen their distress.
Who would want to live next door to this? A mountain of garbage completely covering the front yard. After a barrage of complaints from neighbors, Jim Moraes says finally heavy machinery was brought in to clean up the mess.
Imagine living next door to this house with towering piles of junk for years. The mess is so colossal, it covers nearly the entire property. The stacks of boxes, clothing, and debris are piled up so high and so deep, they actually block the front door of the house. The junk is even spilling out over the homeowner's car. This fed-up neighbor can't believe it.
I'm shocked every time I walk down the street.
He lives right next door. Have you knocked on the door and said, please take this away? I can't live like this?
Oh, yeah.
He says he's complained to the city, but nothing's being done.
And here's where things get a little strange. Hoarding doesn't only happen with physical stuff. There's digital hoarding, with endless emails, files, screenshots. These fears of deleting mirror like physical hoarding. Cultural hoarding, myths of dragons guarding treasure or kings stockpiling gold. Metaphorical hoarding, some people hoard secrets, memories, and even emotions. In a way, hoarding is a distorted attempt at preserving meaning in a world that constantly demands that we let go.
Now, even though we have some idea as to what's going on in the brains of hoarders, we don't really understand why the disorder starts in certain people and not in others. We do know that there are some risk factors. First, hoarding disorder often runs in families, and some twin studies suggest that at least part of it is genetic. And about 75% of hoarders also have some other mental health problem, like depression, anxiety, or ADHD. Many people with the disorder also have experienced traumatic events or had traumatic childhoods. For example, an abusive relationship or the death of someone the person is close to can make hoarding worse or sometimes even trigger it. It's not clear why this is, but some psychologists think that after traumatic events, people may feel safer attaching themselves to objects rather than people who might hurt or abandon them. It's like the clutter gives them comfort. We also know that middle-aged or older adults are more likely to be affected, possibly because the disorder gets worse over time. So even though hoarding symptoms usually start early, like in the person's teens, it might take a few decades or more for things to really get out of hand. There is no full-on cure for hoarding disorder, but cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, can help treat it.
So, what can we take away? Hoarding isn't a quirky habit. It's a complex, painful disorder. Behind the clutter are stories of memory, identity, and fear. With compassion and support, recovery is possible. If you or somebody you know struggles with hoarding, help does exist, and change, though slow, can be real. Well, you've been listening to High Strangeness. I'm Tony, and thank you for spending some time with me today. And remember, there's a lot of strange and unexpected out there, so always keep your eyes, ears, and minds open. And until next time, stay safe.
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.